Hello and welcome. I am so glad that you're here with me today. We are presenting monthly and doing some replays monthly as well. So once or twice a month, you can come in and join me to talk about personal development, career development, talent development. Everything we're doing is to help with the essentials of development that will serve you well in the workplace. I'm Deb Calvert, and for those who are new to Bright Talk, I want to point out just a couple of things. First of all, if you have any technical difficulties, your best option is to look in the lower right corner. You're looking for an orange button. That is the help desk, and during our live presentation, they will respond to you very quickly, and the folks at Bright Talk are really, really helpful and good about that. So be sure and talk to them directly. But if you have questions for me, just pop open the question box and post those for me at any time. I'll be taking the questions as they come. I'll be weaving them into the presentation, and I'll make sure that we get your questions answered. If for some reason there's a question that's too big, or maybe it's a little off topic, or I get it too late in the session, I will reach out to you and answer that by email. So all questions will be answered. If you're attending on demand, I know a lot of you do, it's an open invitation. I would like to hear your questions, even if it's months after I did the initial presentation here. So you'll just connect with me somewhere else, not here in the platform live, but I've given you a link to my LinkedIn, to my profile there, and I encourage you to connect with me or to email me, whether you have questions or not, to link in with me. Look right underneath the video panel here. You're looking for something that says attachments, and that little tab, when you open it up, is going to give you lots of goodies, including the slides that I'll be walking through in today's presentation. Help yourself to all the bonus content. That's why it's there. I want to make this high value for you because I appreciate your time spent here. Well, let's jump into our topic. Today's topic is all about taking risks. Not just for the sake of taking risks, but risks that will help you and develop you and your leadership capacity by giving you a new perspective on how you can be successful using your failures to your advantage. I'm even going to encourage you in this session to strive for more failures, not ones that could have been prevented, but the ones that required a little bit of risk. And you went right on out there and you took the risk because you know inaction also has a certain set of risks associated with it. And yeah, we're going to talk about the F word, failure. And then we're going to talk about some new ways to look at failure and how it actually can help you. And we'll talk about risk taking and how you can get the courage you need to take the risks that are essential. They are these days in business because things are changing so rapidly and nothing is predictable. I am really pleased to meet you. For those who know this channel already, the People First Productivity Solutions channel, I'm presenting regularly about subjects that are useful to people in human resources who are coaching and mentoring and developing talent. And for people who are emerging as leaders, regardless of job level, we're all continually developing, hopefully, as leaders. And we do at People First Productivity Solutions, we offer all sorts of training and coaching options. And I put in an attachment that shows you just some of the ones that we offer virtually. If you like this content that's useful for personal and career development, I encourage you to explore what else is available here for you. Go back and get the on-demand content, check out what's coming up in the future, and let me know what's not here that you'd like to see, because I'm always looking for ideas and input about what will help you to achieve your goals. We're going to start out with a quote, because I think this is a good reminder. Sometimes we have to take a risk. We might be extremely risk averse, and certainly none of us wants to take high risk, low reward sorts of chances on anything. But if we are to keep up with change, if we are to get in charge of change, if we are to even manage our own careers, sometimes there's going to be a risk involved. And the very nature of risk means that you might not succeed, at least not in the traditional sense of that word. You might fail. You might fail, that is, to accomplish what you set out to accomplish, but that doesn't mean that you have failed overall. I think what we need to do is redefine failure. You can use this little graphic, and remember, I put slides in the attachments for you, so you don't have to furiously take notes here. But you read this in rows. So it goes like this. Failure, if we embrace it, if we understand its value, failure is our teacher. Failure does not need to be our undertaker. And failure is, yes, a delay, but it's not a defeat. Just by the very virtue of failing, you now got closer to succeeding. That's why failure is a detour. It's not a dead-end street. And it's not a forever thing. Failure is just a single event. It's a little moment in time. It may feel bigger to you. It may be something that you dwell on. It might be something that you magnify. But truthfully, failure is just a blip. And you want to look at the long term. Like it or not, failure at times is inevitable, right? We don't know when those times are. Unfortunately, that would make it all so easy. But there are times for all of us when we're going to fail. And failure is not always avoidable. We'd like to avoid failing. We'd like to never ever fail, but that's not realistic. That's just not how it works. And if we are to be good learners, if we're going to be strengthened as leaders, if we're going to be the best that we can be, then sometimes we're going to fail. And that can be a good thing. Now, remember, I said there's a certain risk to inaction too. Here's part of it. Failure is guaranteed if you do nothing because other people are doing something. They're trying, and they're the ones who are now breaking new ground or having successes. When we are complacent in the status quo, when we stand still, we will ultimately fail in most things. But inversely, failure is not guaranteed. If you just try something, sometimes you're going to succeed. Probably more often than you give yourself credit for, you're going to succeed when you try something. And last but not least, this is a really important point. Notice the spelling. Failure is your failure. Y-O-U-R. It's yours. You should accept it, embrace it, take charge of it, pick it apart, learn from it, because that's how you get the most out of it. Failure is not spelled Y-O-U''re, failure. You're not a failure. Nobody is a failure. Failure is not an identity. Failure is not something that you should internalize and use against yourself as some sort of an identity. Nope. Failure is not who you are. Failure is not how others see you. Failure is just a moment in time, an experiment or a risk that you took that didn't go quite as planned, and you can be stronger and better for it. So own it instead of trying to duck it and dodge it and overinflating what it really is. If you're going to inflate anything about failure, try inflating the value that you can get from it. Now, I know this is a little uncomfortable, this conversation, but I want you to take everything I'm saying to heart because it's research-based, and if you're willing to admit it, that you have some experiences that bear out what I'm saying too. Now let's talk about why we fail. We all do fail, we've established that, and there are reasons why we fail. So it's not that we're trying to avoid failure. In fact, it's how you cope with failure that shapes you not the failure itself. I love that quote. It's from Carol Hyatt and Linda Gottlieb in a book called When Smart People Fail. So they stress that failure doesn't lie in the event itself, it lies in how we see that event and what we learn from it. They go on to say, if you are a learner, it is possible, without changing the events, to make the concept of failure disappear. So you can own the event and you can make sure that failure doesn't own you or define you. And then you can think about the reasons that we fail. And knowing that you're going to own the failure, you can also perhaps get ahead of some of these things that will occasionally lead to the failure but are preventable. So the failure we can eliminate is the failure that's preventable. That won't be all of it, but you're going to embrace it and you're going to learn from it and grow with it instead. So I'll tell you, to get really personal with you for just a moment, I have been failing to maintain my ideal weight for most of my adult life. And I've failed for every one of these reasons on screen. But I've also learned along the way. And every time I fail, I improve my chances for success. And I do. I keep getting better and better at this. And I know that the last one, never trying, is the only way to truly and permanently fail. So we're going to see if we can't shift our perspective a little bit. The perspective we're shifting is in the way that you think about failure. If you're like most people, you feel that failure is something to be avoided at all costs. Failure is something to hide, something to be ashamed of. But the truth is that no one, not one person ever throughout all time, no one succeeds the first time every time. And when you think about people you respect or admire, you probably realize pretty soon that what's noteworthy about them is it's not just their success, it's how they achieved that success, the hardships they endured, the tenacity they exhibited, or the adversity that they overcame. Like them, we are all more likely to fail than to succeed. And it's up to us to decide whether we want to use our failures wisely or not. So, we're going to shift our perspective, and the next thing we're going to do is handle it. So, after you fail, and you will fail, and it's okay to fail, it's to be expected. But in those times when you fail, after you do, take some of these steps. I don't mean it to sound glib when I say get over it, but tell yourself you got to get over it. Because that's a choice. It's a choice to either dwell on it and let it consume you and to feel embarrassed and all those other things that might come a little naturally and a little suddenly, but they're choices. You can indulge them or you can decide, okay, what do I have to do to just move through this and past this, to get over this? One of the things that you can do is to depersonalize it. Don't worry about blame. Blame's pretty useless. Don't blame yourself. Don't blame others. Remember that everybody fails. So there's no reason to kick yourself when you're down after that failure. Think about Steve Jobs, right? A billionaire. He ran two successful companies simultaneously, Apple and Pixar. But do you remember his next computer? Nope, me neither. It failed miserably. And he used what he learned to build for the future. So we're all in that same boat. We have to analyze our mistakes, and we can't learn anything from them if we're too busy being really hard on ourselves instead. So instead of beating ourselves up, we've got to analyze it. I mean, there's a reason why sports teams watch films of the game after the game. They already know the outcome. They already know whether they won or lost. And each player, because they are so involved minute to minute with the work they do, every player already knows where they screwed up and where they contributed to the team. So the purpose of watching the films is to capture exactly what happened, to analyze precisely what could have been different. And as they're doing that, they're capturing lessons learned. Here's what made us succeed. Here's what led to things not going as we would have hoped. Here's what we can learn from that and do differently next time. Now, as you are in that moment after failing, remember that you're going to be redefining it. I once asked a large company how they dealt with employees' failures because they have a very, very high risk-taking sort of a culture. And this is what they said. They said to me, "We don't have failures. We have learning experiences." And they meant it. As I worked with them over the years, I saw this over and over and over again. Failure was even encouraged because that's where learning came from. I used to live in Silicon Valley in California, and I think that one reason that area breeds so much innovation and why so many new companies crop up there is that when someone starts a company that later fails, they're not considered a failure. Instead, they're considered an experienced entrepreneur. So you want to get that next perspective, right? Jump right back in, decide what your next attempt is going to be, take the learnings from the failure, focus on the future, because, I mean, frankly, the future is all you can change. You can't change the past anyway. Learn from that failure. Don't be ashamed of it. Also be informed by your past successes so you can replicate what worked and you can eliminate whatever it is that didn't work. And with that changed perspective, you're going to be thinking about failure a little differently. You'll realize that it's not accurate to think about that first model. I know we all do it, but it's really not accurate. When we're thinking that way, it shows only two possible paths. Either that we fail, and that takes us one direction, or that we succeed, and that takes us in another direction. But I'd like to suggest that the second model is much more accurate. And it's a healthier perspective to acknowledge going into any decision that you make or any action that you'll take. You see, what's going on there, what's meant to be illustrated, is this. If you want to get to a success, to that future point, if you want to get there, that destination being success, then failure is the only vehicle that will get you there. And in fact, failure is not just a possibility, it's a requirement if you want to succeed. So now we know the destination, it's success, just like we thought all along. And now we see failure as the vehicle. All that's left now, the only thing that's missing still, is the fuel. What do you got to put into that vehicle to be able to travel from that place where you are right now to that place where you want to be, to that ultimate success? And that fuel, easier for some than for others, that fuel is courage. So let's shift. Now that we've talked about failure and are adopting a new perspective about what it is and why it's important, let's talk about the courage that you can put into the vehicle when you fail. You have a little more courage that you muster so that you can keep trying and get to that place where you're more successful. And we're going to start by looking at what is courage. I think that's a safe question, a fair question. Here are some things that courage is not. A lot of misunderstanding out there about these. But courage is not suddenly the absence of fear. People think that those two things are antonyms, that they're opposites of each other. Fear on the one hand, courage on the other. And that's not true. You see, courage requires fear. You wouldn't be courageous if you had no fear. You would just be doing the things that come naturally and easily. Courage is about acknowledging the fear and proceeding even though you feel that fear. But courage, some other misunderstandings, it's not that you are completely ignoring or oblivious to the risks. Nope. To be courageous, you're still assessing the risks. You're still looking for ways to minimize those risks. You're not throwing caution to the wind. This is not about being irresponsible. With courage, you're going to know both the risk and the rewards. You're going to understand that fear is a natural response to anything that's unknown or ambiguous, and you're going to take action anyway. And courage, you know, sometimes we think that it's something that people are born with. Some people are sort of naturally more courageous than others. Well, that's not really true either. Some people may have personality characteristics that cause them to be a little more risk averse. Some may have characteristics that cause them to be a little bit more tolerant of risk. But you still have to decide what to do with it. And fear can be a strong suppressant no matter what those other characteristics are. And I also have to tell you that courage isn't something you can learn. There is no class how to be more courageous because, frankly, courage is just a matter of deciding to proceed. A simple decision. I will or I won't. There are some qualities, though, some qualities that might help you to develop courage and to feel a little bit more secure, a little bit more confident when the time comes to exhibit them. And so I've got those here on screen for you. What I'd like to invite you to do as you're looking at this list is I'd like you to pick one of these qualities that's already a strength for you. We've all got at least one here. And as you know, with strengths, anytime you can leverage what's strong for you, then the other pieces, they may fall in line behind. Or you might break some ice to be able to exhibit other kinds of qualities. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to post for me in the place where it says questions. For those listening live, go ahead and post for me. Which one do you think is a strength for you already? Anything that you see on the list, or if there's something not on the list that you feel like makes you very able to take some risks and to exhibit some courage, go ahead and put that up there for me too. I'm looking for your qualities, the ones that you are already strong in, that maybe you never thought about it before, but they could enable you to be more courageous. They could help you in those moments when you're just not sure if you should proceed. You've got some fear or something else that's holding you back. And these aren't going to be displayed publicly. Your name will not be attached to them. I'm just looking for a list of which ones are strong for the folks who are listening live. And for those who are listening on demand, you should be going through the same exercise. This is introspective. It's meant to help you get some awareness. I've got a couple of posts already for self-motivation. I've got two now for desire to improve the status quo. Are those the only two, or do you have something else for folks who are out there? Oh, here's a tenacity. Yeah, just a desire to not quit. And here's a passion. The things that you care about can be very motivating. Okay, well, we're all different. And none of these are necessarily better than the others. Here's a resilience popping up. These are qualities, whatever yours are, that can help you. In those moments when you aren't feeling it, you're not feeling courageous, I want you to shift and to think about whatever strength that you've just listed or thought about. Because sometimes that can give you a little extra measure of courage. It can remind you of the why to muster up the courage. And it can get you through that time when it feels like there's no way, no how you'd ever take that next step. Oh, this is a good list. We've got, I think, yep, we now have everything represented at least once. Awesome. All right, we've got a question that came in too, and this is a good place to take the question. So someone would like me to talk about how to deal with a risk-adverse culture. Great question. There is a certain sentiment out there that companies are all supposed to be innovative. And in this volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous world that we live in, there's a value that's been placed around innovation. And I think that it would be fair to say innovation and risk taking are not necessarily appropriate to every situation in every company. So let me say that first. You may be in a risk adverse culture, but the first question would be, is that culture okay for the work that that organization or team does? Let me give you an example. There are some things where you don't want any risk. Somebody's going to be needing to be compliant with certain financial data or certain reporting, and there's a very, very specific way that it must be done. Well, in a situation like that, maybe there's not cause for risk taking. Things just need to be done the way they've always been done. So let's take that out of the equation. And then let's talk about the other extreme. Some companies, startups, for example, where the competition is extreme and something new is popping up every single day. Maybe it's in SaaS if you're in technology, right? There's high pressure and extreme need for there to be risk taking. You've got to fail fast and you've got to fail often and you've got to be able to nimbly pick yourself up, brush off, and try something else in order to thrive and survive and to stay ahead of the competition. So if the need is there, so think of this as a continuum. If the need for risk taking is there, then you need the people in the organization and the culture itself to match. Part of that has to do with hiring. Part of that has to do, though, with permission. Even people who are fairly comfortable in their own lives with risk will stop taking risks if it feels like there's a penalty. If it feels like there's a constant undertone of, we've always done things this way, we've never done things that way, and new ideas are not welcome or embraced, well, you'll be fueling a risk adverse culture. To shift that, you've got to give messages that are things about the importance of failing forward, the expectation that people will try new things, not just an expectation that they'll always succeed, but that you want to see ideas, you want to see experiments, you want to see questions like, what's new, what's next, what else? Leaders have to model that. Managers have to set expectations around that. People have to stop getting mixed messages that cause them to be afraid. You can't say we're innovative and risk-taking, but then send the mixed messages that show you're not. So that's my short answer, not knowing any of the other details around that, and I hope that was helpful. Remember, you've got my LinkedIn information. You'll have my email by the time we get done here. I really want to hear deeper dive kinds of questions. So if that was not sufficient, well, let's keep talking. Okay, back to what we started with around courage. Now, why do we need courage? Because we're going to take some risks. So we're going to have a different perspective on failure. Hopefully that'll help us feel more courageous. We're going to leverage whatever strengths we do have, those courage qualities, and we're going to prepare ourselves for risk. Let's start by defining risk. We want to take some of the mystery out of it and talk about it a little bit more matter-of-factly. You know, there is risk in every single thing that you ever do. These days, you shake someone's hand and you might get exposed to really scary germs that are out there. You change the radio station, the whatever it is you're listening to in your car, and you might have a car accident. You roll your eyes at something your spouse or your boss says, and you might have to deal with hurt feelings. You wear the wrong shoes, your feet might hurt by the end of the day. Right? These are all risks, and we tolerate them because we're accustomed to them. We don't think about them every day. We don't even think about them as risky. But the truth is that for most of human history, risk and survival have gone hand in hand. And we avoid a lot of risks because they feel downright threatening to us. Our survival instinct is so strong, though, that sometimes it also causes us to take the biggest risks of all. You see stories about people jumping out of 20-story windows when the building's on fire. So, not taking a risk, our intention is to survive and thrive. Taking big risks, sometimes that too comes from a desire to survive and thrive. Webster's, the dictionary, defines risk as exposure to the chance of injury or loss. But that's really only part of the equation. It's my understanding that the Chinese in Mandarin, they write risk taking, or I'm sorry, they write risk by using two characters together, the character for danger and opportunity. And I like that because that definition expresses both the downside and the upside of any risk that you might ever take, big or small. But you want to take intelligent risks. Risk taking has that certain negative connotation. It sounds reckless. So I want to talk really about intelligent risks, not death-defying, evil Knievel types of risks. Intelligent risks, what I mean by that is the opposite of dumb risk. Dumb risks would be the ones where the odds are clearly stacked against you and there's very little chance of success or even learning. Putting your life savings, your kids' college fund, and all your belongings into a single roll of the dice in Vegas would, at least in my opinion, be a dumb risk. Intelligent risks are those where the potential downside is limited, but the potential upside is virtually unlimited. And those are the risks that you should jump in and take. Let me give you some examples of intelligent risks in everyday life. All right, so let's say you ask someone out on a date. The worst case downside is one-time embarrassing rejection, but the best case upside is a lifelong relationship with your soulmate. So if you could just get past that 30 seconds of discomfort and go for it, that would be an intelligent risk. Here's another one. An intelligent risk is when the timing is right and when you've earned it, is to ask for a raise or a promotion. Worst case downside is that the powers that be say no. The best case upside is that you get a raise or a promotion. And that can have lots of great effects that come from that. All right, so here's another one. You're going to join a new club, a new social circle. Worst case downside, it's a waste of your time and you end up quitting. Best case upside, you make lifelong friendships plus a whole lot of other benefits that come from the club. All right, one more. You decide to take a cooking class. Worst case downside, it's a waste of a little time and money. Best case upside, you become a permanently better chef and you invite us all over for dinner. So, intelligent risks require a little bit of forethought. And it's the thought, as opposed to the emotion, that should drive your determination about whether or not you want to proceed with any risk. And of course, I know, we're going to come full circle now. You're thinking about you're also risking failure. But I just want to propose to you that failure is not really a risk. Not if you own it, not if you use it wisely, not if you reframe it so that it's something that you see as the inevitable and essential step down that pathway toward success. You get to choose what to do with failure. And because of that, your failure, Y-O-U-R, does not have to be anything but a step in the path, a learning opportunity, and a natural progression to ultimately succeeding. Here's what I want you to do right now. Think of any situation, one that's true for you, A situation that you're facing right now, something that may feel very risky to you. And as you're thinking about that, I'd like you to answer each one of these questions about that very situation so that you can assess your real risk and determine what the failure could do for you. So, first of all, you're going to ask yourself, if I do this, if I take this risk, what is the worst possible outcome? And as you're thinking about, go ahead and think too about the best possible outcome so that you've got a nice balanced perspective. Think about worst case, think about best case, and be proportionate between the two. Think about the qualities that you already possess, your courage qualities, resilience, self-motivation, confidence, tenacity, passion, a desire to improve the status quo, or being comfortable about making decisions even in the midst of ambiguity. Use the ones that are already strong for you to muster up the courage that you need. And don't forget to ask yourself, well, if I do fail, what's my learning opportunity? If I fail, what could I learn from that failure? And as you're thinking about that, think about how that failure will help you get to your eventual success. Maybe you'll be successful this time, maybe you won't. But how will taking this step get you closer than you are right now? And then now you've got this moment of truth time. This is where it's time to sort out the emotions from the rational thinking you've just been doing about this situation. What is it that's still holding you back? That fear, that shame? Is it real, or is it something being driven by over exaggerating the reality of the situation and the reality even if you do fail? Be honest with yourself here, because you have an opportunity right now to take control of those feelings and to wrangle them into what they really are, not let them overtake you. And as you think about all that, you're thinking about the risk of failure, you're thinking about the step that you might courageously take. Decide on your next steps, just two or three of them. I will, and if that works, I will. And if that doesn't work, I'll learn. And then you're going to have a handle on how to proceed even when something feels risky. Okay, whoops, I want to go back to that quote. Elbert Hubbard says that constant effort and frequent mistakes are the stepping stones of genius. And I agree. I agree. We really can't. We, we can't. I don't know any other way to say it. We simply can't choose to always stay exactly where we are, doing exactly what we've always done. In our personal lives, in our professional lives, there will come times when we've got to make effort and even mistakes so that we have an opportunity that's going to come to fruition a little bit later. Now, I've just given you a whole lot of stuff that maybe you already knew. Maybe you heard it in a different way today. Maybe you can take some of these ideas and remember them when the time comes to work on that situation that you were thinking about. I'm just going to do a last call for questions. One of them is not exactly related, at least I'm not seeing how it's related to the topic, but I'll tackle it anyway while you're posting any other questions. And that is, could you talk more about ageism? And I don't believe I've talked about ageism, but I'm going to talk instead about isms overall. I did say something that makes me feel like maybe this was connected in this way, and that is that things are just different for people, right? So you've got a certain set of skills and traits that may equip you to be courageous, and I've got a different set of skills and traits that might cause me to be courageous. And you've got a different risk tolerance than I do. We're just different. There's no good, there's no bad, just different. And I think it's important to accept that there are these differences instead of pressuring people to be more risk uh, tolerant. Or instead of judging people when they are more risk tolerant and they seem to be hasty, maybe there's something there that we could learn from them. It's just different, not good or bad. And I feel the very same way about any ism. I don't think that's exactly what this question is about, but I'll say this. We shouldn't make any blanket statements. Nobody of a certain age is more or less equipped. Nobody of a certain generation, nobody of a certain background is more or less equipped for any sort of risk taking. The truth is, we all have something that we have to grapple with if we're going to get better and better at risk taking and as failing forward and using failure as a tool to help us. All right, so another question, any suggestions for productive reflection after failure? Great question. And yes, my number one suggestion is definitely do it. Do have productive reflection when you fail. You may have the moment that comes first, and you might have to work through that before you can productively reflect. Emotion drives the moment of embarrassment, shame, denial, wanting to distance yourself from the failure, wanting to blame other people so that you are somehow protected from what feels like the backlash about that failure. But if you'll notice, if you'll really take time to reflect, you'll notice that most of those embarrassments and shame and blame and everything else is coming from you, not so much from other people. Maybe somebody else said something and it triggered in the back of your mind all the other similar statements you've heard throughout your lifetime. We've all heard similar things. But in this moment, having had that failure, how can you, despite those emotions, how can you learn from it? How can you, if you could rewind, how can you think about how to do it differently next time? How can you make sure that it doesn't swamp you and keep you from accomplishing what you really wanted to accomplish? Some people like to journal. Some people like to talk to others. Some people like to take their time and give a little space between what happened last week and now being able to analyze it. Do something, whatever one of those or whatever else works for you. Just don't go into denial. Don't pretend it didn't happen. Don't try to tuck it away so that you won't have the learning from it. Remember, we said you're going to own your failure. Owning it means you're going to do something with it. And productively reflecting on it is a fantastic place to start. Okay, another question. Do you think admitting a failure and bringing it to the forefront can be freeing instead of hoping no one will notice? I do think that. I think that from personal experience. It's one of the reasons I said to you earlier that I've struggled to maintain my ideal weight my entire life. You know, for the longest time, I tried to deny that to myself and to others. Well, of course people noticed. I'm out there, and anytime I'm with people, they're going to notice that I've picked up a few extra pounds. Me denying it, pretending it wasn't there, not talking about it, didn't change it. Me being accountable for it and expressing it openly, me putting it out there in the forefront as something that's a reminder and an example and a learning opportunity has actually served me a lot better. And I think that's probably true for all of us. We respect people who are accountable. We respect people who take their own failures and allow others to learn from them. And we respect people who don't deny that they're fallible. All right, we have run out of time. So you're going to check out the website. You're going to take the attachments. You're going to make sure that you are getting what you need. And if you would, please go ahead and leave me a little review and any comments, any feedback that you think will be helpful for future presentations. Connect with me on LinkedIn and come back for future presentations here on the People First Productivity Solutions channel. Thanks for being here.